18 years ago, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called Addison's disease. And this film is all about the things that I have learned about living with chronic illness and how they apply to making, life much more vibrant and meaningful, just wonderful, whether or not you actually have a chronic illness. So when I got out of hospital and I'd been diagnosed, and it had been a period where it had been a difficult period. Anybody who has an autoimmune condition will probably sympathise. That time before you actually know what's wrong with you, it's really tricky because you know that there's something wrong. And getting a diagnosis can just be wonderful. So I came back from the hospital and I had my little leaflet, but really what I was desperate for was to find somebody with some lived experience. What I wanted to know was, what was I in for? Now, this was a time before social media. There wasn't Facebook, there wasn't Facebook groups, there wasn't Instagram, but there were blogs and there were some forums. So I took to Google. And after a funny time, because the thing is that Addison's disease is relatively rare in humans, but very common in dogs. So there was masses of search results for dogs. Dogs. Very little for actual people. But then I found a blog. And in this blog, this poor woman, she was just describing how she hadn't been out for weeks, and then how she'd had somebody come in to cut all her hair off because she didn't have the strength to brush her hair. And I found it devastating, just awful. And here I was, my early 30s, 2 small children, business growing organic cut flowers, which is quite a physical business, just looking forward to life. And here was this picture of somebody not having the strength to pick their hairbrush up. And this is why I have always mentioned having Addison's disease whenever I've been on podcasts or in blogs and so on. Not because I'm wanting any kind of sympathy, because I do not need sympathy. I live a really lovely life. But because I don't want anybody else who has just been diagnosed, who has just taken to Google, to find that woman with the hairbrush. I want them to find examples of people who are living full lives, because often what you expect is what you get. And I want people to expect great lives. I mean, not lives that are unaffected, obviously. It's a very different life that I live now to before I was ill, but in no way, really, when you look at it, is it lesser? It's just different. It's just different.
It is so cold today. I had intended to do the next part of this film down in my studio, making ink from avocado pips. That is next month's class in my online membership, the Studio Club, and I thought it would be good to give you a glimpse behind the scenes. But actually, it's way too cold to be in there for very long. So instead, I'm going to do what I have to do there really quickly, and then take everything back up to the house instead and work there. Here I am in my sunroom all set up with the avocado ink draining through a coffee filter, and I'm going to sit and experiment with painting with it while I chat to you. So after my diagnosis, I spent that 18 years working out day by day what exactly allows me to thrive and what makes me crash. And if I'm honest, there was a lot of overdoing it and crashing in those early years. I overworked massively and I paid for that by missing so many important things. But gradually, I honed techniques, simple things that make or break my day. I've always said that in the same way that people say, if you want something done, ask a busy woman, that if you want to learn how to manage energy, ask someone whose energy is severely rationed. If you want to find out how to make the best of time, ask somebody who really doesn't have very much time. I shared the things that I did in the hope that they could help other people with chronic fatigue, with brain fog, and with problems with pacing. Then a couple of years ago, I began to see articles about how one of the most important things in human health was regulating the nervous system. That we need to prevent cortisol from flooding our systems as it sets up a chain reaction that can affect everything from gut health and inflammation to anxiety and depression. I've got a free sheet all about this, along with some suggestions for activities, which you can download under the video. The main point is the importance of not spending our time in fight or flight mode, as though we were poised to outrun a tiger. It is in this state that cortisol floods our bodies so that we have increased focus and strength. Now, possibly that sounds great, and it definitely helps outrun the tiger. But being in flight or fight mode too much causes inflammation and can spark all kinds of illnesses. And instead, we should really spend most of our time in what's called rest and digest state, where we're most social, where we can see the bigger picture, we're more relaxed, we're more altruistic. And reading all of this, I suddenly realized that all of the things that I had been doing for myself, thinking that it was just relevant to me and possibly other people with Addison's disease, that all of these things were actually at the heart of this new way of thinking about health. And I suddenly found that my Addison's disease is actually a superpower in identifying solutions. Now, let me explain. Addison's disease is when your body stops producing steroids. It isn't a case of dwindling steroids. It isn't adrenal fatigue, which people can get from overwork. It is practically no steroids, or indeed no steroids at all. And left untreated, it is fatal. You fall into a coma and you die. And 100 years ago, I would have died fairly swiftly. But now, Addison's disease is treatable, and the treatment is very simple. Every morning, I take an artificial steroid, and that is my steroid allowance for the next 24 hours. Some Addison's patients take tablets through the day, but my body rejected the steroid that you can do that with, so I take a one called dexamethasone, which is slower acting, and it's a once a day thing. And I find that that tablet optimally gives me 12 to 14 hours properly awake. Now, that's not amazing, but it is perfectly fine. However, if I do anything that makes my body use up those steroids, anything that would in a healthy person be called cortisol flooding, then I can actually feel the energy seeping out. In an extreme case, if, for example, I felt myself going into a coma, I might have to supplement with extra steroids. But that is something that is not advised on a regular basis, as it causes everything from weight gain and hair loss to osteoporosis. So my main tactic for living well has been removing as many things as possible from my life that cause that cortisol flooding. And where I can't completely avoid a situation, coming up with ways to minimize the rate of the cortisol use. In some ways, I am the canary in the mine. I can tell hour by hour if my body is using up steroids too fast. I think that the things that affect people in this way are all very individual. So it isn't a case of following rules or looking at what somebody else does and copying that. Instead, you need to look at the way things make you feel. Question everything. Find the things that soothe your particular nervous system. These are basically likely to be the things that you would definitely not do if you were required to run from a tiger. They are the things that reassure your mind that you have life under control, that there are no tigers. And in the worksheet that you can get under this, I give examples of the things that I personally do and prompts to help you discover your own rest and digest activities. I'd love to know how you get on and what activities you pick, if you would share them down in the comments. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back and see you soon. Goodbye.